In my last couple of videos, I compared the MiG-29 SMT and the F-16C, looking at their weapons, their dogfight capabilities, how to beat it, etc. But this time, let's talk about more so of top tier as a whole. What is top tier going to look like? Why do I think it is in trouble with this coming update? And what I think needs to happen for top tier to be better. But before that, a quick word from today's video sponsor. GE for War Thunder is an app you can download on the Google Play Store in which you complete tasks of varying difficulty to earn various amounts of Golden Eagles. Depending on how difficult and time-consuming the task is, that's going to determine how much Golden Eagles you get for free for completing it. I would recommend doing the easier, shorter ones and just get a few hundred Golden Eagles and put that towards unlocking some modifications for new aircraft, getting a low-tier SL grinder, or maybe even just buying a day of premium time for a weekend grinding session. Download the app in the description down below and use my code on screen here for 10 extra Golden Eagles. So let's run through the list of things that I do not like about this update. And that being said, I don't hate the update. It's not the absolute worst thing I've ever seen Gaijin throw in our face, but that being said, there's definitely some things that I think need to be addressed. And we're going to start with the MiG-29 SMT, which is pretty much the center of all controversy here. We have in-game the MiG-29A, the German and the Russian model. They are basically the same plane. I know they're not actually the same plane, but for all intents and purposes, in War Thunder, it's the same thing. You get the two best missiles in all of War Thunder, the R-27ER. These things outrange the Sparrow, they out-accelerate the Sparrow. They're just all around the best thing you can possibly have. Yes, you can avoid dying to them by flying low to the ground, just like everything else, and that's awesome. I like flying low to the ground too. But unfortunately, you just can't always be flying low to the ground, and on top of that, your teammates certainly aren't going to be all flying low to the ground. And so a team with a lot of R-27ERs is going to be able to turn the tide of an ARB match very quickly and very effectively. You can launch these things from true BVR ranges of 50 and 60 kilometers away, no problem. A Sparrow cannot touch you from that range, and honestly, the Phoenix is outgunned from that range as well. The ER is just going to get there first. Basically, most people with an IQ above 2 on War Thunder pretty much universally agree that the ER is a top 2 or top 1 missile in the entire game, and it's on the MiG-29 only. The MiG-29 also has some of the best flight performance for a normal ARB game. Is it the best 1v1 plane? No, of course not. As I showcased in some of the videos previously, especially the SMT is not going to be a fantastic 1 versus 1 plane. The MiG-29A that we have currently is a much better airframe for that type of fight. But let's be honest, ARB is not full of dogfights. You're actually very rarely ever going to get a dogfight. So if you do get one, sure, having an F-16A Block 10 is going to be awesome. But at the same time, having a plane with very capable weapon systems like the MiG-29 helping to prevent you from coming into any kind of dogfight situation in the first place is arguably even better. And if you have a whole team of them, that's likely what's going to happen. And basically, if you've seen my latest top 5 jets in War Thunder for top tier, I have the MiG-29 number 1, and these are pretty much all of the reasons why. Now we're getting the MiG-29 SMT, which is still a MiG-29. It holds a lot of the same characteristics as the MiG-29A. It's just a little bit, well, considerably worse in a dogfight. But as we were just talking about, that's not always so important. You're still getting your 27ER, and you're still getting an upgraded radar. And get this, it's getting even better missiles because it certainly needed better missiles. It's now having an R-73, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. It's probably not going to be the end of the world by itself anyways, we'll get to that later. And it's also going to have an R-27ET option, which is new and only for the MiG-29 SMT, and that is going to be a good missile. I don't think it's probably going to be as good as the ER, but it's still just annoying because why is the already best platform in the game getting even better? It's frustrating to me. We don't need better and new missiles on the MiG-29. The MiG-29 is fine as it is. Sure, the R-60 is a little bit outdated. I'm not against the R-73 being added to it as long as it's actually balanced. And now we're getting to the real issue that I have with this update, and that is these new missiles, the R-73 for example, and now the US with their AIM-9M coming on the F-16C. These missiles are likely going to have some kind of flare resistance. How strong exactly, we don't really know. We got to play around with it on the dev server a little bit. The flare resistance was constantly getting changed, so it's really hard to gauge what they decide is going to be acceptable for the live server. But I will say, that the developer there's only one developer when it comes to making missiles in War Thunder and how they work. That developer has told us that the AIM-9M is going to be worse flare resistance wise than the R73 is. So that's probably good news for everyone, but it also just depends on how they model the R73, right? If the R73 is super strong, then it's not going to matter because it's still going to be really good, even if it was a little bit worse than the R73s. But if the R73 is balanced and it actually is flareable, granted you put a little bit of work in, then it's probably not going to be a huge deal. Either way, this is the beginning of flare resistance in War Thunder, and I think it needs to be talked about because when you break it down, War Thunder ARB matches right now, 16 versus 16. Let's do a little bit of math real quick, guys. You take 16 players on the enemy team, and we're going to take an average missile count of about 6. Some have 4, some have 8, most have 6, so I'm going to go with 6 here. You have 16 times 6 gives you 96 potential missiles on the enemy team. And let's take a look at your countermeasures. As a single plane, it's usually going to be 60, and you're going to have to run mixed, which is going to give you 30 flares and 30 chaff, and those are going to drop 2 at a time as the lowest amount you can drop at once. So basically you have 15 pops of countermeasures to defend yourself against 96 potential missiles. Sure, some planes have more countermeasures than others, but again, we're just going to take the average here. I'd say most planes right now at top tier have about 60 countermeasures, so those are the numbers I'm going with. Now currently in top tier, it is at least doable. Sometimes you'll find yourself running out of countermeasures, especially if you've been kind of in a carry position in the game where you're just getting your hands dirty all match, you're getting a lot of the enemies interested in you, and yeah, every once in a while you run out of countermeasures, but for the most part, right now, it's not that bad. You can one flare pretty much every missile at top tier, and your 15 flare pops can actually go the length of the match pretty reliably. But I'm really questioning how reliable it would be if we have missiles with some real countermeasure resistance to them, like AIM-9Ms and R73s with real IRCCM. Are we going to need to use 4, 5 countermeasure pops each time we try to flare these things like we did on the dev server? If so, you have enough countermeasures to flare all of about 3 AIM-9Ms or R73s before you die. That's not even enough to beat a single plane full of 6 of those missiles. If somebody in a MiG-29 with the flare-resistant version of the R73 we had on the dev server hops on tier 6 and just starts spamming all of his R73s at you because he decides, screw you, I want you out of this match, and he's just going to shoot all of them at you until you run out of flares, that's just not fun. I don't think anybody is going to be interested in that kind of gameplay. And so I see 2 options here for Gaijin. They could, 1, reduce the flare resistance of all the flare resistant missiles. So they're going to have to make IRCCM a little bit watered down compared to what it really should be. And that is a valid option, but I think it's an option that not too many people are going to be happy with, because I think a lot of people enjoy that pseudo-realistic feel to the weapon systems in this game. And introducing IRCCM missiles without giving them any kind of real flare resistance is just kind of, well, it defeats the purpose. And so I see the second option being the much better option, and that is to reduce the player count of an ARB match. It is currently 16 versus 16. Like I said, 96 potential missiles on the enemy team. That is just too much. There's no reason for that. We can definitely reduce the player count. The matches all happen very fast. You still get the furballs, just like we used to back in the day. Nothing about the gameplay has ultimately changed other than the initial start of the battle happens with distance, and you can do a little bit of BBR in the beginning. But other than that, it's the exact same top tier as we've had for years. I think most people would agree right now top tier is chaos. There's a lot going on at once. There's a lot of missiles flying from all different directions. You're constantly just spamming C key, living with that third person free look camera, and there's too much to keep track of, it really is. Now imagine that with a lot of countermeasure resistant missiles flying through the air that you have to drop half your countermeasures at once just to be able to survive from, and then there's 95 of them more to go that could be shot at you. And that's not even considering that later in this year, or probably early next year, I'm guessing December of this year though, we're going to be looking at AMRAAMs and R77s and all kinds of active radar homing missiles that are going to require more countermeasure drops. And it's just going to be a cluster, man, it really is. Yes, separating flare and chaff will help with this issue. but it is not going to be enough. There's going to be too many missiles in there, there's going to be too much to worry about, and these missiles are going to require too much countermeasures, and your plane's just not going to have enough to go around. Unless you're in something like an F-16C or an F-14B, you're just out of luck. There's not enough countermeasures for you. They model the planes with a realistic amount of countermeasures, for example 30 and 30 on the early F-16s, because that's what they actually had in real life. But what they don't consider when they do this is that these planes weren't designed to handle 16 threats at a time. These planes were never designed with 16 versus 16 in mind in real life, and so Gaijin ultimately needs to pick, do they want a realistic match size with reduced player count? I'm talking as little as 6 versus 6, 8 versus 8 would be ideal in my opinion, or at the most 10 versus 10, that's an option. Or do they just ignore how many flares and chaff a plane realistically has and just give them as much as they see required to actually enjoy top tier? They're going to have to do one of those two things if top tier is going to remain fun with these more modern weapon systems making their way to the game. There's other things they could do to help with this, like spreading out the map objectives, giving people different bomb targets spread out across the map, maybe air-to-ground radars throughout the map that people could go for, and if you don't kill them, they might spot you from further range for the enemy team, or if you do kill them, the enemy team's not going to have that spotting. Things like that. Guys, you could get a little bit creative trying to spread out the match, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you disagree? Do you agree with the match sizes needing to be reduced from 16 versus 16? Again, let me know in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you when the update drops, probably this week.